I'm John Gill, and I will be interviewing former judge and former district attorney Randall E. Nichols today, January 30th of 2020.
I'm Randall E. Nichols. I was born on September the 13th, 1948.
Randy, tell us a little bit about your overview of your career, what you in the legal world.
Well, of course, I graduated from law school in 1973 and went to opened up a little firm out in the north end of the county, out in Hall's Crossroads, with one of my classmates, and we tried to scratch out a living. I got on the appointments list, both from Judge Duncan and Judge Ford, and started taking appointed cases in the criminal court. I learned fairly quickly that that was kind of my cup of tea. I couldn't get very involved with a divorce or even a car wreck, but a shoplifting case or any kind of criminal case would get my juices flowing. So I very heavily involved in that. And then in February of 1976, General Webster called me one afternoon and invited me to come to work as an assistant district attorney. And kind of odd, because I had never met General Webster before. I knew you and Herb Monsieur and Ralph Harwell and some other lawyers that worked for him. And so I took that job in February of '76 and prosecuted cases. And of course, one of the interesting parts was that the creation of Division III of criminal court was in 1976. And so I was really the first assistant to man that court. Me and Andrew Tollison we handled that, and gently was started out with when Judge Baltsaris got elected. And so a unique experience, the new judge and new prosecutors in the old Andrew Johnson ballroom where the school board meets now is where we held court.
Good. And I think you had in your career after being an assistant DA, just very briefly, tell us about that.
Well, of course, after I left, I went to work. Ralph Harwell and I opened up a law firm in 1980, and just basically doing criminal defense work was what we tried to specialize in. And so we did that, had a good time. I ran for district attorney in 1982. I lost. Went back to the private practice and worked there until Governor McWhorter appointed me to the criminal court bench in 1988.
What did you do after that?
Well, I was very honored, of course, to be picked. I thought it sounded all very exciting and such as that. But really and truly, it didn't take me very long to see that I had probably made a mistake. If I could try some cases, I was okay, but I didn't enjoy it as much as most people thought. And I always was displeased when judges tried to get into my case, when they would interfere with my case. And I wasn't on the bench 6 months, and I caught myself doing that, getting in the place of the lawyers. And I thought, well, you hated it. Why is it better for them? And so the truth of the matter is, I had made a decision to leave the bench before General Dossett passed, because it was just not working well for me. I missed the courtroom so badly. And then, of course, when General Dossett passed, with cancer at a very young age, Governor McWhorter called me and wanted to know if I would like to be the district attorney, and I said, yes, sir. And so in August of '92, I became the district attorney for Knox County and stayed there until 2014, when I chose not to run for re-election. 22 years and 2 weeks.
And I think you're kind of have a semi part-time job now. It sounds like sometimes it's full-time and sometimes part-time. What are you doing in your semi retirement?
Well, my title is Special Counsel to the Sheriff, and so I worked for Sheriff Jones when I left the District Attorney's office, and now work for Sheriff Spangler. And my duties mostly is the prisoner lawsuits that we have filed against us. I handle a great number of those, and I'm doing a good deal of training now for both the incoming officers and for their continuing education. So I teach a lot now.
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit about your growing up. Where were you born? Your early years with your family, very, very briefly.
Well, I was born in South Alabama, a little town about 60 miles below Montgomery, Alabama, in 1948. And we lived there. My grandparents lived next door. My uncle lived on the other side, and my other uncle lived across the street. The road, it wasn't paved, and so we had the Nichols clan, and my granddad had a farm, and so I had just a glorious childhood. We had a great time. My dad worked for International Paper Company down at that time, and so in 1960 I was 12, just turned 12, and he was invited to join another paper mill that they were building in Counce, Tennessee, near Savannah on the river. And so we loaded up the truck and we moved to Savannah, Tennessee in February of 1960. So just thrown right back in it. And of course, what a great place to be a teenager. We lived on Pickwick Lake. I just had a glorious, glorious time, and I was always enjoyed school and
Siblings?
such as that. Got two brothers, two younger brothers. One's 4 years younger, and the other's 8. And so we just everything was good. Then, of course, most of the people from Hardin County, Savannah, where I was from, the west end of the state, of course, go to UT Martin. A lot of my teachers and such were UT Martin graduates, and I just didn't want to do that. I had never been east of Nashville in my life until Mother and Daddy drove me up here in the summer of 1966 and put me on the stoop of Hess Hall, and I waved goodbye, and I never went back.
Other than to visit us.
Other than visit, and I'd go spend the summer. I'd work at the paper mill in the summer. That was a good paying job, and so I could do an 8-hour shift and then water ski or fish for a while, and so it was good for me. I enjoyed the university, and I enjoyed East Tennessee.
Well, you didn't just go to undergraduate. You went to law school. What figured into your decision to go to law school?
That's a roundabout thing. I had decided I wanted to be a professor of economics. That's what I was going to be. I wanted to be a professor, I thought, and of course economics intrigued me. So I was moving along. One of my best buddies and roommates was a guy named Jimmy Glenn Creasy, and he's from Pulaski, Tennessee, and he was going to go to law school. And he told me one day, he said, I'm going to take the LSAT next Saturday or some Saturday in the future. Why don't you come take it with me? And I didn't know what that was, and I had never thought about law school in my life. And I teased back then it cost $12.50 to take the LSAT. And so one Saturday we go, I'll never forget, UT's playing football, and here I am taking a test when there's a football game going on. I thought, well, I've lost my mind. But the proctor was real good. He'd keep writing the score. We could hear the cheers from the courtroom at the building where we were taking the test. And I guess because I didn't care much about it, I did pretty well. And next thing I knew, I had some law schools call and say, you want to come here to go to law school? And so I narrowed it down to Duke and to UT. And I met with Dean O'Neill. I remember his name. He came here recruiting and from Duke Law School, and I met with him. And I never forget great advice. He asked me, he said, what do you want to do once you become a lawyer? And I said, well, I want to practice law. And he said, well, if you want to practice law in Tennessee, you need to go to Tennessee. He said, now if you want to go to Wall Street or you want to go to D.C., come on over to Duke, and we'll get you ready. And he said, but you'll get to know people all across the state, your classmates. He said, it'll pay off for you in the private practice of law. So I took his advice, and as soon as I graduated, about 3 weeks later, I was in law school.
How was that experience? Who were some of your favorite professors?
Oh, I had Dr. Overton, constitutional law, that I shall never forget. Inspired me. I mean, he loved the Constitution. So, and I just, I've, I tote a copy with me most of the time, as you know, in case somebody wants to know what it says. We'll read it together. So Jerry Phillips and evidence was very good to me. Durwood Jones was the income tax professor that really helped me graduate from law school, because I was going to fail income tax. It just wasn't my cup of tea. And I just didn't care. The truth of the matter was, I shall never forget the exam is that you were the owner of a baseball team, and how you were going to do your taxes on personal service contracts and such like that. And I read there's only one question on the exam, and I thought, I don't have a clue. I didn't have a clue. And so I wrote down, I would find the best tax lawyer in town and associate him to help me with this problem. And I turned it in, and Professor Jones, he said, well, you can't be through yet. We've not been in here 10 minutes. And I said, well, I think I'm through, Professor Jones. I wasn't going to graduate from law school. And then he looked at the paper and he said, not a bad thought. So he let me pass. I always appreciated that. I owed him my career, I guess. But I had some wonderful professors at UT, and they were always nice to me.
Any good friends you made there that made an impression on you or stayed with you later in life?
Well, of course, Gary Wade. Gary and I went through all the way together. And then, of course, the guy that I practiced with initially, Ron Hedges. Ron had some problems later on in his career, but he was a very smart fellow and a very good lawyer. And so we fell apart, but it was a little bit different. It seemed like I was in the throes of a divorce after my first year in law school, and so I kind of lived here or there. I lived in my car for a little bit. Chancellor Williams, Tripp Williams, was kind enough to let me have a room and stay with him for a short period of time. And then my great friend C.K. Smith, who's chancellor now over in Wilson County and in that district, let me move in after his wife kicked him out, or she left. He had an extra bedroom and he let me move in. And so it was, at the end, I was not paying close attention to my studies.
When you went out and started practicing on your own, what did you mostly do?
Well, of course, in 1974, we got very heavily involved in the savings and loan business. That's when the state chartered savings and loans. Ray Blanton was governor, and so me and Charles Robinette from up in the Kingsport area.
Who's been since then has been with a number of major banks, run a number of major banks.
Yes, yeah. And of course he's dead now, but but we started 3 savings and loans in East Tennessee and 1 in West Tennessee, and so I got very interested in that. But it was never the same to me as a shoplifting case still. I mean, it just never was the same to me. I appreciated the wage. We made a little money. I liked that, but that's not what I wanted to do with a law license.
Do you know why Ron Webster came calling?
Well, I think what it was is I had been in a theft, it was just a theft charge, grand theft at the time, on a guy that had from old Hageman's truck stop. He was the manager, and they accused him of pilfering some money. And he said that Hageman's had their finger on the scales. And so we thought we could back him down, that they'd never want to prosecute because he was going to say bad things about the company. In fact, Aubrey Harwell came over and monitored the trial for the Hageman truck stop people. And I turned that, what would normally be a day-long trial, we took about 8 days. And just Herb and Ralph just beat me to death.
That's Herb Monsieur and
Herb
Ralph
Monsieur
Harwell.
and Ralph Harwell, and we
We're
just
prosecuting,
yeah. And we had at it. And a jury was out for a while. My guy got convicted. I will say, Judge Ford sent him to prison, in fact. After that, I mean, it wasn't but like 3 days after the trial ended that I get this call. So I always assumed it was Ralph or Herb or both. You know, Ralph is from Savannah, Tennessee, too. Now, he was 5 years ahead of me, so I never knew him because he had graduated from high school before I got in. But he was a bit of a legend, you know, very smart, very studious, and so everybody knew Ralph was going to do well, and so we, of course, became the best of friends.
What do you remember about your time as assistant DA? What was your favorite part of that?
Oh, trying cases. You know, as you know, we could try all we wanted. We wanted to try one a day. We tried one a day. Sometimes we'd try two. As you remember, we could pick a jury, send a jury out, pick another jury, and try another case. Today, nobody believes you anymore that happened. But and we tried a lot of cases, and there was nothing. I loved it so. Still do. Don't get to do it anymore, but I loved it.
How long did you work at the DA's office?
Right at 4.5 years, a little over 4.5 years. And then, of course, Ralph, I took Ralph's place when he left. And then he went to work with a law firm, and then he solicited me to come and join him. So I thought, well, let's go be a rich lawyer. You know, why not? And so we did, and of course we had a nice business. We did mostly criminal defense work. Of course, in the early 80s, cocaine was the coin of the realm at the time, and we represented a lot of people that were in that business. And it was fascinating. It was just fascinating to me.
You do mostly state work or federal work?
Both. Anything. Generally it was you indicting the cocaine people that I represented. So, but a lot of it was federal work, and of course we did some homicide cases and some big murder. We did several fairly large murder cases, and so we had a nice practice. Ralph and I had a nice practice. And of course, you were with us for a period of time before you became the United States Attorney, and and as I remember, you had some pretty interesting clients too. But we that element, they knew that we did our best to represent them, and so we had our share of that business.
Yeah. I would say that Ralph was probably one of the most important influences in your life, particularly your career.
Oh, I thought I thought was probably one of the best lawyers I'd ever seen. He could cross-examine a person. I never could get to that level of ability, but he was a masterful lawyer, and he was just straight up. I think that's what it was. He didn't lie, and whatever it was is whatever it was. And I learned that you're going to have to face it sooner or later anyway. Might as well come on with it right now. And so we were very, very close, as you know.
Well, obviously, if the governor's calling you and wondering if you wanted to be appointed to something, you'd been involved in, as governor recorder, in Democratic politics. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, of course, from West Tennessee, there were no Republicans. I didn't know what a Republican was till I moved to Knoxville. We didn't have any, and so would get involved. My dad loved politics and was a huge it was pure Democrat, so we had worked for Ray Blanton. My dad and my mom and dad were good friends with Ray and Betty, and so I had gotten my teeth wet a little bit, in that in '74, and enjoyed it. And then when Governor McWhorter ran in '86 for the first time, I got very heavily involved. I spent a lot of time and helped with some financing and such like that. And of course, he was such a delightful fellow. That was easy work. A little hard to sell the Democrat up here. Then Congressman Quillen came out for him, and it made it a lot easier. And we did real well. We just did real well, and as a result of that, we started a friendship that lasted until he died. My son worked for him. He was good to the Nichols family.
We've been talking about the political side and some of the lawyers. What about the judges you dealt with at your various stages of your career?
Well, of course, you know, for people our age, Judge Taylor is the first one anybody ever mentions, and I don't think there's ever been a judge that was more kind and considerate of me than Judge Taylor. I've heard lawyers, you know, they just terrified of him, but that was. I'll tell you the story. I've got some boys that have pled guilty, and it's sentencing, and so he sentences, and then my guy said, "Hey, I got my wife sick. Can you get me delayed on reporting?" And so I asked Judge, "No, you know, go, Marshall." And so, and he was crying and everything, and he said, "Please," he said, "go ask him again." And I thought, well. So I go back there. Don Ferguson was there, and I asked if I could speak to the judge, and he got in, and I can't remember precisely how it started, but he asked me, he said, "Where are you from?" And I told him I'm from Savannah, Tennessee. He said, "Oh, Shiloh." Well, of course, Judge Taylor, as you know, was a big Civil War buff. Well, we started talking about Shiloh because I'd been over there and been to the museum, and I knew how many soldiers were killed, and I could talk Shiloh with him, and we had the best time. And about a 20-minute conversation with Judge Taylor, which was a long time for him. And then he said, "Now, what was it that you wanted?" And I said, "I need a 60-day delay on report." He said, "Well, Mr. Ferguson, make that the order of the court. Make that the order of the court." and after that, of course, one time I was back there in the thing, he said, "Are you the one John Gill asked me to vote for?" I said, "I hope so."
What about state judges?
Well, of course, George Ballesteros. I love George. He had a sense of humor that was really beyond belief. He had a great way about him. He could be so nice to the people that were in court, but now once you got convicted, you had your little problem with Judge, because he was going to send you to penitentiary in all likelihood, and we just got along real well, and I learned how he kind of wanted it done, and so I tried to make him happy, and he was happy with me, and we got along famously. Of course, I had some work with Judge Duncan, but most of it was with Judge Ray Ford, and of course he was just one of the best there ever was. I thought he was if you were going to get somebody, a role model, I would have thought Ray Ford would have been the guy. He was just so squared away, just straight up, and there was never any question on his integrity. And he could be tough. And he was tough. I always respected that. I asked him one time, I said, how do you handle after you've just sentenced somebody to death? How do you handle that? He said, well, when you've been on a battleship directing fire, killing people that you can't even see, it's not that hard. And he was something, though. And as you know, we were great friends up until his passing. We still visited, eat lunch periodically. I had a chance to go and visit with him and eat supper with him shortly before he died. He was always very nice to me.
Now, when you decided to leave the bench, Was that a hard decision? You sound like you were ready to go.
I was going to go. I was going to go back into private practice. I didn't know that Mr. Dossett was going to die. I didn't have any idea about that, but it just wasn't going to work for me, and it wasn't good for the bar. I didn't think. I'd had about all I wanted of it, and like I say, I missed the courtroom. I wanted to go back, and I wanted to be down there, not sitting up here calling balls and strikes.
And I believe the same governor that appointed you to the bench was still the governor when that job came open.
Indeed. In fact, he said, I don't know factually, but governor always said I was the only guy he appointed to 2 jobs while in his career. And I hope if that's the case, I appreciate it, Governor. I loved being the DA.
When did you have to run again? Soon after that?
But of course, when I got appointed to the bench in June of '88, I had to run 45 days from the day I got sworn in. I was on the ballot. Randy Reagan was the Republican nominee in '88, and so we were successful. And then in '90, the field for the whole 8-year term, I didn't have any opposition. Then, so then when I got appointed DA in '92, I had to run again in '94, and as you remember, General Webster decided he wanted to be the DA again, and he ran against me, so. It was tough a little bit because I always was thankful to Ron for giving me the job. I always appreciated what he had done for me and my family, so it was a little bit difficult, but you get in a political race, I guess all that stuff gets left behind. I tried my best to beat his brains out.
Well, once you got the job, talk a little bit about what your priorities were and what your experience was, what the most rewarding things about that job was.
Well, of course, I thought one of the most rewarding things, you and I got back together again. It's been a long time, but you came on the same day I did, as I remember. We came in together, and I thought we shared the same kind of mentality, and it was an interesting period of time then. The position of district attorney was changing, and we were very much involved with the National District Attorneys Association and trying to listen and learn from people from other places, and Dusty Dayshaw and some of those guys that had been around, and their purpose was to change the role of the district attorney, where you were more of a community leader, more involved in the entire community rather than just sending people to jail or prosecuting cases. And I thought we did a pretty good job of that, of getting into the community a little more, prevention things, the old common ground, where we started bringing people together to start talking about some stuff, spending a lot of effort and energy in juvenile court, try to get people away from a life of crime, and being out front. And of course that fit me pretty good. I liked that, and I thought overall we did a really pretty good job on that. I think we were tough. I've said what I did may send me to hell. I don't know, but I'd change. I'd do some of it differently a little bit on the way I felt about people and how long you ought to be in prison and those kind of things. I think I've matured a little bit. My perspective has changed some, but I'm still a believer that there are people that need to be in prison. I wholeheartedly believe that, and we just need to do a better job of identifying who they are.
I believe you were one of the founders of the Family Justice Center.
Yes.
In fact, the building now is named after you.
Well, it sure made my mother proud to see my name on the building. But I thought that was something that had to happen. We were, you remember very well, people would be charged with family violence, domestic violence, and and if the lady didn't show up, we just dismissed the case. If she don't want to fool with it, we don't either. That sort of attitude, and we learned that that's not the way to run a railroad. And so when we tightened up and started making some cases whether they showed up or not, and paying attention and making sure there was some accountability for this abuser, and trying to pay attention to those children that was watching it every day and every night. That we knew where that was going to lead us. So I don't know how well we did overall, but I know we spent a world of energy and time on trying to deal with that. And I guess 17 years later, I guess something worked. It's still there.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed some of your alumni that work for you are in public office in the justice system here now.
Well,
talk a little bit about that.
Well, I kind of take a little pride. All but one of the sessions judges or criminal court judges are some of my children. There's only one down there now that did not work with us at some point in time, and I don't know, of course, how much influence we had. I like to think that they knew we tried to do the right thing. I can't remember if it was you or somebody else. The rule is never do the wrong thing for the wrong reason. You can do the right thing for the wrong reason, but never do the wrong thing for the wrong reason. And I thought that was a good rule to follow, and I have followed it all my life.
And the criminal court level as well.
Well, now with Judge Hickson, Judge Sword, Judge Green, all were worked with us for years. Good people. That's why it makes you feel good that people that we know are good people and competent, smart people want to do that work. I've attempted to dissuade some of them. They don't listen to me anymore.
And of course, you're one of your people that was coming in to practice as a prosecutor just when you came into this job as district attorney is now your successor.
Yes. Yeah, Mr. Sharm was helped run the child sex unit for me for years and years, and just a good, decent person with a good heart and a hard worker. So I was very, very pleased to try to support her, and I was very pleased to see the people picked her to be the district attorney. I wish her every success.
How do you think the practice of law has changed since you started out?
Well, we're not as nice to each other as we used to be. Goodness, we'd go up the street and eat lunch with somebody we were in trial with, and we knew everybody. I think when I came to the bar, there were a little bit under 400 lawyers in Knoxville. You knew almost everybody, and of course, so many of them had been so generous with me, had helped me in my young career. Lewis Haygood and Mr. Frank Flynn, some of those old masters, Rex McGee, they taught me a lot of stuff, and they were glad to do it, and I was sure glad to receive it. Stored a lot of it. But Sharm, and I'm just glad there were some people that we had that wanted to continue to do the work. I think the citizens have benefited from that.
If you had a young lawyer that wanted to practice in the defense or prosecution side, what would be your advice to him?
I'd tell him the Constitution gives you room to do both, friend. Just have at it. What makes you happy makes you happy. And I think it's honorable work to represent people that are accused of a crime. I've always said I think that lawyer is following the Constitution as much as those of us that are prosecuting. So I'm not sure that it don't help you to have a little of both. Some it maybe gives you a little more empathy. There are generally people behind the defendant that care about him, as Ralph always said, there's somebody that loves him. Somewhere in the world, there's somebody that loves him. Now, what he's done is not anything to write home about, but his mama loves him.
When you look back on things, are you glad you did it?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know that I'd change a thing. I might have skipped that judgeship, but over and above that, I don't know of anything that I would have changed at all.
But you made, when you were a judge, you made a lot of lifelong friends with other judges, did you not?
Oh, I did. In fact, I'm still invited yearly to go to annual golf thing that some of my old friends have, and we can reminisce. And of course, Riley Anderson was there, and Lyle Reed was there, Sissy Daughtry, some people that I had tremendous respect for, and their intellect was so big that I enjoyed being around those people and tried to learn all I could from them. Lyle Reed and I became really pretty good friends, and on the bench you're not supposed to play politics, and I was having a little trouble with that. And he mentioned to me one day, he said, you might want to get you some other work. In a very friendly way, but reminded me now, stay out of these. Because, some race got started, it's just more than I could do to stay out of it. I don't think I broke any of the rules, but I guess I came close a few times.
I guess maybe we haven't talked about your family much, but I guess one of the best things about working for the district attorney's office, you met your lovely wife, Laura.
Yes, we've just celebrated 42 years of marriage, and she was a young secretary, and that General Webster hired, and we started dating. He didn't much approve of people in the office, and we tried to keep it from him. I think we were fairly successful in keeping it from him for a while, but certainly that would be one of the highlights of those early days in the DA's office.
And your children now?
Ross is living in Nashville and works for a health supply company and travels over 6 or 8 states selling medical equipment. And then my daughter, Leanne, she's a labor and delivery nurse at UT, and she and Chad have our 3 grandbabies. We've got a 13 years old, 8 years old, and 4 years old. 1 boy and 2 girls, and so that's pretty much our life now.
I think in your spare time you like to play a little golf, don't you?
I still like to play golf. I used to take a little pride. At one time I was fairly good at it, and now I just go out and just have a big time and chase it around. I don't practice at all anymore, and I still love to play, but it's not quite as much fun as it used to be.
And I think you've been very involved in your church.
Laura still works for the bishop, the Episcopal bishop. She's still the administrative assistant, been that for almost 15 years now, and so the Church of the Ascension that we attend is a big part of our life.
Anyway, well, we thank you for taking time to do this. It's interesting to me. I guess there are a few things maybe I didn't know, not too many. But anyway, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate it, and I will remind you that I kept very secret all the stuff I could tell on you.